All right, folks, we've got a really not so good change going on right now with PS5's UI and how the console normally handles game hubs. We all know 4 years on, PS5's UI was designed in such a manner where it's very similar to PlayStation 3's XMB or the PS4 dynamic menu when you tab downwards, where you'll look at your software and a developer supplied image, some key art will appear, take over the entire screen. If they supplied a track from the game, that'll play as well. I've actually always really liked that design principle and how it stuck around three PlayStation consoles onward. And for PS5, that's been like part of the UX, right? The user experience is your software is your themes, and it takes over the entire screen. And it's always been a pretty nice thing. I know folks really didn't like that last change, which was like over a year ago now at this point, where they tied activity cards directly into the game hub to where now if the game has cards and those cards have developer supplied images, then that screen will take over the software's background. And depending on what you're playing and what that image is, sometimes it looks a little goofy or weird. The example I always love using here is that when I was playing Ragnarok for 40 something hours, the activity card for doing Odin's Ravens, that was the one that was always displayed for the background. Not the just standard key art, which looks really cool and beautiful. It was always just the Odin's Raven screenshot, which looked really dumb and silly. Now we did have, the recent firmware, and I'm not talking about that the little firmware that addressed the problem with Final Fantasy 16's weird graphical artifact issues. The 10.0 update, the one that had adaptive charging, 3D audio profiles, the custom ones, the welcome hub as well, which is really great. I know those in North America probably mostly have this by now. Still, for people in Europe, it's coming within a month or so. It's primarily server side. You'll just log in someday and see this, so don't worry about that. But the one item on that changelog was, and they say, and I quote here, "We've made it simpler to access the most popular activities from game hubs. Game hubs now only display activities that are currently in progress. To play a specific activity, start the game first and find it using in-game menus." Now, I'm one of the few people that's been following this and testing like activity cards and how they integrate with the menu very closely for the 4 years that we've had this console. That change was pretty big in that they got rid of the start game and resume activity button, which sat next to the play game button. That's unrelated to what's going on here, but I thought at the time with that changelog item, that was referring to how some games will display that background image for an activity that might not actually be the one you're working towards. So again, my Odin's Raven example, that's silly. That should not be the art that displays the entire way through. It should at the very minimum change to maybe the main story path, and that should be the card that displays. And for the most part, the games that I was testing, that's kind of how it was working. And they dropped the resume activity button next to the play game button because that was kind of redundant when you have two play game buttons right next to each other, because developers mostly have not really used cards in such a manner where you're resuming activity and going to that portion of the game and bypassing menus. Like a lot of games don't really do it that way. So it was always super dumb to have two buttons right next to each other that kind of just are cold starts. So they got rid of that button and then also made a slight change to what cards should display. And that's how it did work. But recently, and we don't know when they did this, must have been 1 or 2 days ago, now it's pulling the official news, which official news has always been on the console as well. This has always been baked into the console for a very long time, since launch. In fact, those in the US remember before the Welcome tab, we had Explore. Explore was basically game news, and it's still on the console, mind you. Obviously, it's much better to have the widgets be the first thing you see, and you can customize these, and you can even go out of your way to turn off like official game news and things like that. But the standard news tiles are still there. They never went away. They're just tucked out of view. So if you do care about these, you can always go back and look for them. And there's the following mechanic in the game as well, which basically means that anytime you even so much as download a game, they automatically follow it on your account. And then you can unfollow things manually, or you can go to manage followed games. I find that this is kind of pointless to even manage, because the second you just download something, you're going to follow it again. So this is kind of independent of the problem we're going to talk about right now, which is, as I showed with 16, it shows the rising tide official news. Now, the official news thing actually was appearing even during the beta period, but this must have been server-side where they just turned this on, where now it pulls the images from game news as well, and that's the problem. It will be highly dependent on the news that was published, and if this is really egregious and a full-blown advertisement where it's very annoying. Or in some cases, like this, I would actually argue is not the worst thing in the world. It's kind of dumb that it's, advertising the rising tide when that was back in, that post was back in April. These things were all always, they were always here. They're actually, I don't mind that they're there. They're tucked away and they're on the very bottom. If you want to look for them, they're there. The issue is you start pulling this stuff and putting it right in my face. That's a problem, especially with how the console was. Like, I like how it was designed. I like key art. I like the music from the game. I think it adds personality and flavor to all your software. Something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I don't find this to actually be that egregious either, if only because, it's something you play very often and game news is very relevant, and actually Yu-Gi-Oh! Has cool art for cards, and so this is going to change on a rolling basis. I don't mind this either. Genuinely. I think this makes sense, and contextually, it works for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I've been playing Vampire Survivors lately. I bought the game. I have it. This is kind of stupid. Vampire Survivors is out now, and you bought it. Good job, buddy. Like, it's a weird indirect change, right? Because it's going to depend on what game news was published by that studio or publisher. So, like, this would be relevant if you, follow game news on the Explore tab or something, but not when it's going to pull it directly for the game that you own. Now, a lot of titles won't actually display anything. If no news was ever published for it, then you can see you're going to still get your standard key art. Classic games, that's not going to be a problem. A lot of PS4 stuff's not going to be a problem. Even some SIE titles, there's no game news for Astrobot apparently, so that didn't change at all. But you start digging into your games, you're going to see some examples that are just flat out not a good look, right? So where is a good one here? Well, we can do Ragnarok, and this one is, I don't hate the background image, but at the same time, I prefer the key art. It says 5 things to know. Join Ragnarok's Valhalla game directors, Bruno and Mihir, and I like them, but I don't necessarily think that's a good way to approach the the user experience. Let's go down to Forbidden West and Community Spotlight. We're highlighting, things that you may not necessarily be interested in. Again, like, I kind of like that it was stuck down here. Actually, I'm shocked that it's pulling this news from the 31st, but not Lego Horizon Adventures, which I think that was showing up for, let me go down to PlayStation 4. If I go down to Zero Dawn, yeah, now this is just a full-blown ad. If you're, for whatever reason playing the PS4 version of Zero Dawn right now, you're going to get an advertisement for Lego Horizon Adventures, and it's full-blown right in your face. I mean, this is what are they doing? Oh, it's not a good look. Okay. There's some other examples too. Let's see. Part 1 displays. Yeah, this is like a video or something. Inside The Last of Us Part 2. So we're removing key art for the game and showing this instead. Why are we doing this? But again, it's indirect, right? Because they just changed what prioritizes, like what takes priority for the background image. So now it's this. This was published back in, what was it? March. Why? It's silly. It looks dumb. So we've got that. Let's see. We have a different one. What's another weird one that shows up? Snatch Sifu up now. Okay, we're advertising that it's free on PlayStation Plus. Okay, well, that's not relevant at all. Because look when that was published. Oh, God. What are they doing here? Escape the City. Okay, that's still official news. So what I haven't actually tested yet is if we can bypass it by, and it's weird to say this, but there's got to be a way to sort of override those images, you would think, which is probably going to relate to an actual activity the game might have. Yeah, the cycle of awards. Like this blew up on Twitter with Earl Turlet follows me on Twitter, so thank you, Earl, if you're a viewer, and your post is a good way to highlight the core issue here. Depending on the games that you own, this is just going to look flat out bad, real bad. Warhammer 40k shows off some sort of advertisement for a video. Final Fantasy VII Remake is advertising Rebirth with all those 10 out of 10s. Definitely has some vibes from that like Batman box art back in the day, which looked ridiculous. Happy Star Wars Day for the for what is that, Battlefront 2. Yeah, this is not exactly the change I wanted to see with the PlayStation 5 UI, which I'll still argue this all day, every day. I actually think foundationally the console's UI is very good. It's very simple, very direct, and I like how it puts your software at the forefront. But the second you start prioritizing ads and game news and news that's super old and irrelevant, you've just completely killed the foundation of what makes, I think, this UI very special. Rift Apart, celebrating the 20th anniversary armor pack. Oh god. Okay, let's see what we can do here. So something like Helldivers 2, I know. If I can find it. Yeah. So this has standard key art, but this very much is a game with plenty of game news that's, I say plenty, but it's not published that often. So if I start playing that, we'll see what happens. If I was a betting man, I would say that Helldivers 2 is very much going to change the image now that I've given it a fresh start, because I've actually had it off for a little bit on this profile. And that's probably why it's not going to pull the game news just yet. And right away, it's changed to Poisonous Premium Warbond. Again, everything's, it's contextual. I would actually argue that if it's a live service game and they publish news frequently and this is always changing and they keep it to key art, which I think is cool and relevant, I'm actually not opposed to that. But it looks very dumb when you have this blanket on-off switch and now you're pulling in, art and full-blown advertisements that may not really be relevant to the game art or even the game itself when you own it, and it's advertising PlayStation Plus or it's advertising DLC that came out over a year ago or something. Let's say you're playing a complete edition and it's advertising the DLC. It's very strange and silly. Very silly. So we'll close that. See, I think with Stray's the kind of game that has actually been a really good example here outside of me loving Stray. The game does prioritize that main mission card when you're playing the game. Now, luckily, the key art for this is, or rather the game news art is key art, so this will always, not be a problem. But in theory, it should change to the art for the card. So to get an activity going in progress, I can start the Dead City on this slot, which the game will load very quickly. And there's our Dead City card, and that's the art that would normally pop up for the game. But it is not appearing. So activities will be down here. That is that's so bad. Why did you guys do this? Even what we had before, I would say, is arguably much better than advertisements. Or rather, prioritizing the ads. Again, the ads were always there. They lived under here, and even if you can't, you can unfollow the game, but that's still not going to not display official game news under game hubs. They're always there. They'll always live there. You can't dismiss them per se. But again, I find they're not really a problem when they're tucked all the way down here. If anything, you sort of have to go out of your way to see them if you do want to see them. Okay, so Stray doesn't matter. Playing the game. It no longer changes that image. I sincerely hope this was not a matter of the company really pushing ads in such a manner that is now going to see this be a more commonplace thing. Especially because game news really is not, you can run through your software and check each individual game and tile and thumb down here. These are very infrequent. These just don't pop up that often. Studios are not really making use of game news that much. If anything, they use them less often than cards themselves, Oh boy. Hopefully, if there's enough noise, they'll address this. It was seemingly a server-side change. It would appear as though they've only just recently done this, and it don't look too good. Don't look too good. Well, with that in mind, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.